There are many ranges and great varieties of such units, all existing behind your perceivable reach. To lump them together in such a way, however, is misleading, for within all of this there is great order. You are not utterly unaware of the existence of some of these units, though you do not experience them as mass. You interpret some of them as events, dream events, so-called hallucinations, and sometimes certain ranges of these units are interpreted by you as movement through time. All of them cast certain quote-unquote atmospheric conditions, or reflections that color physical events as you know them. Some of your own feelings are propelled into a reality within such systems, adopting within that framework their own mass and form. In the creation and maintenance of your normal reality, you focus your daily waking consciousness so that it becomes effective within the ranges necessary. Ideas and feelings that you want made physical carry within them the mechanisms that will put them in the proper range, well within the electromagnetic field necessary for physical development. Your consciousness, however, is equipped to create realities in other fields as well. Now, in certain dreams and out-of-body experiences, your own consciousness moves faster than the speed of light, and under such conditions you are able to perceive some of these other forms of quote-unquote mass or matter. The electromagnetic energy units are quite simply incipient forms of reality, seeds automatically given birth, suited for different environments, some appearing within the physical framework, and some not conforming at all to its prerequisites. Now, some systems of reality are quote-unquote bounded with centers of faster-than-light particles. These begin to slow down at the rhythmic rate toward the peripheries, in your terms over great distances, until actually the outside slower particles to some extent imprison the center masses even though they move much more quickly, but within a confined area. The behaviors of such units, as you can now see, form the particular camouflage within any given system, while the peripheral activities effectively set up inner identities and outer boundaries. These are all variations, generally speaking and very simply put, on matter as you think of it. The same applies to negative or antimatter, however, which you do not perceive in any case, but the gradations of activity within such systems are as diverse. Basically, however, no system is closed. Energy flows freely from one to the other, or rather permeates each. It is only the camouflage structure that gives the impression of closed systems, and the law of inertia does not apply. It appears to be a reality only within your own framework and because of your limited focus. Now, the duration and relative stability of such quote-unquote matter within other systems varies considerably, with intensity determining the strength of all such manifestations. The invisible electromagnetic energy units form your physical matter and represent the essential and basic units from which any physical particle appears. It will not be physically perceived. You see only its results. Since consciousness can travel faster than the speed of light, then when it is not imprisoned by the slower particles of the body, it can become aware of some of these other realities. Without training, however, it will not know how to interpret what it sees. The physical brain is the mechanism by which thought or emotion is automatically formed into electromagnetic energy units of the proper range and intensity to be used by the physical organism. These electromagnetic energy units, then, are the psychic building blocks of matter. Question: is experiencing inner vibrational touch akin to reading an aura? Answer: no. Inner vibrational touch is a much more personal experience, more like, quote-unquote, becoming a part of that which you perceive, rather than, for example, a reading of an aura. Question: does Jane ever prevent your coming through when you want to? Answer: on several occasions I have communicated my willingness in particular circumstances. I knew more about those circumstances than Rupert. Some of these occasions occurred fairly early in our sessions when Rupert was worried about spontaneous trances, so after making my presence known to him, I acquiesced to his decision at the time. On a few occasions, certain conditions have been poor. Usually Rupert reacted to these adversely at his end. That is, the interference was such that it would bother his situation rather than mine. Question: are animals fragments of human beings? Answer: in one manner of speaking, you are fragments of your entities. Yet you consider yourselves quite independent and not thrust off second-handed selves, so dogs and other animals are not simply the manifestation of stray psychic energy on the part of human beings. Animals have varying degrees of self-consciousness, as indeed people do. The consciousness that is within them is as valid and eternal as your own, however. There is nothing to prevent a personality from investing a portion of his own energy into an animal form. This is not transmigration of souls. It does not mean that a man can be reincarnated in an animal. It does mean that personalities can send a portion of their energy into various kinds of form. Perhaps reincarnations are over for a given individual, for example, yet within him is still some sense of yearning for the natural earth with which he has so often been involved. So he may project a fragment of his consciousness in such a way into an animal form. When this is done, the earth is then experienced in the way natural for the form. A man is not an animal then, nor does he invade, say, the body of one. He simply adds some of his energy to that present in the animal, mixing this vitality with the animal's own. This does not mean that all animals are fragments in this manner, however. Animals, as any pet owner knows, have their own personalities and characteristics, and individual ways of perceiving the reality available to them. Some gobble experience. Their consciousness can be immeasurably quickened by contact with friendly humans, and emotional involvement with life is strongly developed. The mechanics of consciousness remain the same. They do not change for animals or men. Therefore, there are no limitations set upon the development of any individual consciousness or growth of any identity. Consciousness, both in the body and without, finds its own range, its own level. A dog, then, is not limited to being a dog in other existences. A certain level, again, of consciousness is necessary, a certain kind of knowledge, a certain understanding of energy organization before an identity can manipulate a complicated physical organism. As you know, consciousness has a great tendency to maintain individuality, and yet to join in gestalts at the same time. An animal consciousness after death may form such a gestalt, and other such consciousnesses in which abilities are pooled, and the combined cooperation makes possible, for example, a change of species. In these and other cases, however, the innate individuality is not lost, but remains indelibly imprinted. Consciousness must, by its nature, change, and so identities must also change, not one blotting out the other, but building upon it, while each succeeding step is maintained and not discarded, you see. In such interrelationships, the steps or identities are each immeasurably enriched by the added perception of the others. As mentioned earlier, thoughts, containing their own electromagnetic reality, have form, whether or not you perceive it. With each thought, then, you send out from yourself shapes and images that can be quite legitimate realities to those within the system of reality in which they are propelled. In the same way, personalities from other systems can send energy to yours. Since much events do not originate within your system, you do not understand their import. Now, some life forms are being developed in what you think of as present time. They will not appear physically until you reach your future time. They exist now, however, as certainly as do, say, the dinosaurs. You only choose to focus your attention upon a highly specific field of space-time coordinates, accepting these as present reality, and closing yourself off from all others. Specifically complicated physical forms are not the result of previous simpler ones. They all exist in larger terms at once. On the other hand, more complicated organizations of consciousness are necessary to form, enter, and vitalize the more complicated physical structures. All structure is formed by consciousness. Defined in your terms, a fragment is a consciousness not as developed as your own. The living portions of nature are the result of your own creativity, projections, and fragments of your own energy, energy that comes to you from all that is, and goes outward from you, forming its own image manifestations as you form yours. Since you do not perceive the future and do not understand that life goes out in all directions, then it seems only logical to suppose that present forms must be based upon past ones. You do close your eyes to evidence that does not support this theory. There is no single-line development, in other words. The fragment elements directed outward by you as a species also add, of course, to your physical reality, for without the fine balance maintained, and without this cooperation, your particular kind of environment would not be possible. I have told you often that you do yourselves a great injustice by limiting your conception of the self. Your sense of identity, freedom, power, and love would be immeasurably enhanced if you could understand that what you are does not end at the boundaries of your skin, but continues outward through the physical environment that seems to be impersonal or not self. Biologically, it should be easy to understand that you are physically a part of the earth and everything within it. You are made of the same elements, you breathe the same air. You cannot hold the air that you take within you and then say, "This is myself, filled with this air, I will not let it go." Or you would find out very quickly that you are not nearly so independent. You are biologically connected, chemically connected, with the earth that you know, but since it is also formed naturally and spontaneously from your own projected psychic energy, since you and the seasons even have a psychic interaction, then the self must be understood in a far greater context. Such a context would allow you to share in life experiences of many other forms, to follow patterns of energy and emotion of which you barely conceive, and to sense a world consciousness in which you have your own independent part. Question. So also minutes and hours have their own consciousness? Answer. What you perceive of time is a portion of other events intruding into your own system, often interpreted as movement in space, or as something that separates events, if not in space, then in a way impossible to define without using the concept of time. What separates events is not time, but your perception. You perceive events, quote-unquote, one at a time. Time as it appears to you is instead a psychic organization of experience. The seeming beginning and end of an event, the seeming birth and death, are simply other dimensions of experience, as for example height, width, weight. Instead, it seems to you that you grow toward an end, when an end is a part of a particular experience, or if you prefer, person event. We are speaking then of multidimensional reality. The whole self or entity or soul can never be completely materialized in three-dimensional form. A part of it can be projected into that dimension, however, extending so many years in time, taking up so much space, and so forth. The entity sees the whole event, the whole person event, with the time element, or age in your terms, as simply another characteristic or dimension. The person event is not cut off, however. Its greater reality simply cannot appear within three dimensions. It is instead composed of atoms and molecules that you do not perceive, both above and below the physical range of intensities, and all of these in their own way possess consciousness. In greater terms, seconds and moments do not exist either, but the reality that is behind them, or that you perceive as time, the quote-unquote outside time events, are composed of units that also have their own kind of consciousness. They form what appears as time to you, as atoms and molecules form what appears as space to you. Now, these are units moving faster than the speed of light, excellent energy sources intruding into and impinging upon matter without ever materializing. They will be interpreted differently in other systems of reality.